Are you looking for a delicious blended scotch from Compass Box that doesn't tout the $100 price tag? Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary, where I produce whiskey reviews, informational videos, and buying guides. Today we're going to be talking about Orchard House from Compass Box by the man, the myth, the legend, John Glaser. Despite only having reviewed a few Compass Box whiskeys on this channel, I've tried a ton of them, and they've always been awesome, although the price does still factor into it, as rarely do they drop below $100. And committing that much money to something that you haven't even tasted is tough. Now, I personally suspect that all of these high prices, just across Scotch and across whiskey in general, comes from the higher price that barrels are getting on the secondary market, as well as in the Scotch world, a lot of distilleries are keeping their best barrels for exclusive releases that are limited release, and etc. etc. And so blending houses like Compass Box can't get their hands on them for a reasonable price. Released in 2021, the Orchard House is a no-age statement whiskey at 46% ABV. It's comprised of 39% Linkwood, 29% Clanleash, and 20% Benrinnes barrels, all first fill ex-bourbon. Then the last 12% is a mixture of 8% malt from an Oloroso seasoned barrel, likely from Aberlour, 2% ex-bourbon Kalila, and 2% of John's favorite mixture of Highland malts aged in a barrel with heavily toasted French oak heads. Never heard of Benrinnes? I'm not surprised. It's on the lower slopes of Speyside's Sentinel Mountain, and it's one of these distilleries that make such good stuff that it all gets bought, so they never bother keeping it for themselves to release their own single malts. They don't disclose the age of this, but it is a blend, so it kind of makes some sense. It's not expected. But a little digging into this will tell you that it's about 8 to 10 years old. Now, before we get into nosing and tasting, I feel like I must address maybe an elephant in the room that you've noticed. Why is this bottle so full? I can't possibly do a review on this. Well, my friends, this is my second bottle because I happened to finish the first while planning out this review. And so I went and bought another one. So that should tell you a little bit about what I think. As for the nose, this reminds me of like 9 years ago when I started the channel, or maybe 10 at this point, I'm not even sure. And I was reviewing things like Glenlivet, like the old Glenlivet 12. And at that point where I hadn't had a whole lot of things, that to me was so fruit forward. It was incredible. Like, I couldn't believe it. It was probably when I realized whiskey could taste like apples. And that is a big chunk of this for me. Orchard fruit is such a good name because everything I'm smelling here grows out of a tree. Like, this smells like apples. It smells like pears, mangoes. It smells like coconuts. It smells like, what else? Like, all the things. It's so much fruit. It's so light too. There's no alcohol on the nose here whatsoever. At 46%, it's not like crazy, but it's surprising. Like, this is not an old whiskey. I'm not expecting it to be smoothed out too much. But on the nose here, the only thing I'm smelling that's not a fruit is like vanilla. And that's just coming from the barrels. But when you're mixing together just all this craziness along with that little bit of Oloroso, there's a little bit of like an apricot as well. Just everything fruit. Real quick aside, something I want to point out to you guys, and there's two reasons I'm doing this. A little behind the camera action here, I guess. When you see me drink this, it's usually my second or third sip of the night, because that first sip is tough. And like I said, two reasons. Number one, it's tough to talk immediately after having your first sip of a whiskey, just like immediately right to a camera. But second, and this is more important, if you're drinking along with me, you might not pick up any of these flavors on your first sip. Wait for your second, third, fourth, fifth sips, okay? I think you'll have a much better time of it. So take that away. All right, let's go ahead and have a drink. Cheers. I feel like that was a weird face I just made. That's okay, I'm keeping it in. All right, so here's the thing. With this whiskey, the first thing that you might taste, especially like I mentioned, if this is your first sip of the day, is it is a little bit rough with the alcohol. But that is literally the only detractor here. There are so many flavors going on, and let me at least try to tell you about them. So first thing that you're getting, like I said, a little bit of alcohol burn. But past that, you've now got apple. You've got apple very briefly. It's strong, but it's brief. Then it's followed by pear, and then an apricot. But then it goes a little bit darker, and it dips a little bit more into that Oloroso. And you're, typically when I say Oloroso, you're thinking things like dark fruits. And by that, I mean, think of a red wine. You've got things like plums, black cherries. You've got candied raisins or darker, like just a raisin-y flavor, red grapes, things like that. It's like a red fruit. But in this case, I am tasting kind of a little bit on the side of that candied raisin, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards a plum flavor. And part of that has to do with just the way it's sitting on the back of my throat. So that's going to be kind of in the finish. Additionally, some of the other things you're going to get out of here, I don't know. Like I saw online some people saying anise, which is basically black licorice. I don't taste that at all, but that's me. Let me know in the comments if you guys get anything different. Only other things I can think of in here are there's a little bit of lime and no lemon, which is a little strange. Usually you get one, you get lemon or you get both. You don't usually just get the lime. So that's interesting. And then there's vanilla, maybe a little bit of toffee as well. But most things are leaning heavier towards the front, which are those really bright, nice fruits. So let's talk overall with this whiskey. I'll just come right out and say it. This is going to get a stock it from me, but give me a minute to explain to you all of my thoughts about this whiskey. So I love this one for a buy it too, by the way. If you want to just try it out, you should buy this. It's $40. You're not gonna dislike it. All right, but here's the thing. I just bought my second bottle of this. So clearly I'm starting to live up to my own thoughts about what I thought of this whiskey, which is to stock it. And I would see keeping this on hand for newer whiskey drinkers. I also see people walking through a store, and for two reasons I think they might want to pick up the Compass Box. Number one is, let's say that they're a new whiskey drinker, they're over in the Scotch section and they're just looking and they have no clue. They're going to look for things that they recognize, like Johnny Walker or maybe even Glenfiddich or something like that. They'll be like, oh, I've seen that bottle at a party or something. This bottle, however, the artwork of Compass Box is basically unrivaled. They have such wonderful artists under their employ or that they hire, who knows. Either way, this one stands out on the shelf, especially for a third of the price of a lot of the other Compass Box that are around it, if not less. So they're gonna wonder, is this one okay? Kind of reminds me a little bit of their Nirvana from Paul John, which is a great whiskey at $35, but compared to the rest of the Paul Johns, where that's like a third of the price, it does make you question why. But in the case of Compass Box, I would always gamble on them being okay. So yeah, I would suggest that you buy this one. I think it's awesome. I think it's a great purchase for the price. And actually, I even brought it to the Bastards Ball down in Texas in 2022, I think. Just, you know, I had to shop while I was down there, and I was like, oh, let me pick this up because I knew it was good. Other than that, I want to remind you guys, go check out Whiskey Dick Picks. Make sure you spell it right. It's down here. Those are all of my single barrel picks. And with this time of year where you might be buying presents for people, picking out a bottle of whiskey for somebody that, you know, you need to buy a gift for, it is a good way to do it. Especially like if you like my channel, you know I'm picking something that you're gonna like. So check it out and do me a favor, go buy a bottle or two. All right, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Join me next week where I'm going to be talking about Russell's Reserve 10 year for my Thanksgiving episode, because I always like to cover wild turkey. All right, have a good rest of your night and cheers.